It was a bright morning in June 1986 when Michael Harper and his daughter Emily climbed into their green station wagon, ready for an adventure they had planned for months. Michael, a single father, had saved every spare dollar from his mechanics job at Thompson's auto shop. He wanted to show Emily the wide world beyond their small hometown of Omaha. Emily, an 8-year-old with curly brown hair and wide, curious eyes, bounced in her seat, clutching a map that Michael had carefully folded the night before. He smiled at her excitement and adjusted the rearview mirror so he could see her face full of wonder. They set off on Highway 26, windows rolled down against the morning sun, the breeze carrying the scent of pine trees from nearby hills. Emily pointed out every detail: a red barn with peeling paint, a field of grazing cows, and even a bright cello school bus paused at a dusty crossroads. Michael laughed and taught her how to recognize mile markers so they could track how far they'd come. At each town with a name on the map: Valentine, Ogallala, Julesburg, they stopped to stretch and explore historic markers or old-fashioned diners painted in pastel colors. By midday, they reached a diner called Rosie's Roadside Cafe. Rosie herself welcomed them inside with a warm wave. The walls were covered in photographs of families who had passed through over the years, and a jukebox in the corner played a gentle country tune. Michael ordered 2 hamburgers and fries, while Emily chose chocolate milk and a slice of cherry pie. As they ate, Emily carefully wrote a postcard to Grandma Louise, describing the friendly waitress, the old jukebox, and the huge milkshakes she eyed with delight. Michael sealed the postcard and took Emily outside to drop it into the mailbox. By the diner's entrance, back in the car, with pie crumbs on her lap, Emily gazed out as the world turned golden under the afternoon sun. Michael pointed out cattle ranches and told her how ranchers moved herds across the plains long ago. He guided her through reading the map, explaining how to look for rivers and mountains. Every few miles, he played a game of I Spy, challenging Emily to spot a red truck or a barn roof that looked like a triangle. Her laughter rang through the car, bright and clear, and Michael felt a surge of happiness. He loved these moments, simple and full of discovery. As they drove further west, the flat plains began to rise into rolling hills. Emily rested her head against the window, eyes growing heavy. Michael glanced at her and decided they should find a campsite before nightfall. He asked her if she wanted to sleep under the stars or stay in a small motel room. Emily, still excited, whispered that she wanted to camp. She imagined sleeping by a fire, listening to crickets sing. Michael grinned and told her to choose their campsite when they found the perfect spot. Just before sunset, they turned onto a gravel road leading into a clearing among tall pines. Michael parked beside a bubbling creek. He unpacked their camping gear: a green canvas tent, 2 sleeping bags, lanterns, and a small cooler. Emily helped by carrying the lantern and a bundle of firewood. Together they unfolded the tent and secured the stakes. Michael showed Emily how to hammer them in so the tent would stay firm if the wind picked up at night. Emily tried it once and giggled when the hammer missed the stake and bounced on the soft grass. With the tent set up, Michael built a small fire as Emily gathered stones to circle around it. She found dry branches and leaves, stacking them in a teepee shape. Michael struck a match, and soon golden flames warmed the clearing, casting dancing shadows on the trees. He roasted hot dogs on long metal sticks while Emily held the marshmallows ready for toasting. The night sky deepened into navy blue, and stars began to appear one by one. Emily's eyes grew wide as Michael pointed out the Big Dipper and Orion's Belch. She tried to count shooting stars, squealing each time she saw one. After dinner, they sat close by the fire, and Emily curled up on Michael's lap with the postcard tucked safely in her pocket. He used to fish with his father at Lake McConaughey and catch sunfish with bear hooks. Emily asked questions about the fish in the big lake. Michael described the clear water and the feel of the breeze on a hot summer day. She imagined herself there, holding a fishing rod under a blue sky. The fire crackled, and the night air grew cooler, but Emily didn't seem to notice. She was wrapped in her father's stories. The fire burned low. Michael helped Emily brush her teeth at the creek's edge, using water that glistened under the moonlight. He guided her back to the tent, and helped her slip into her sleeping bag. Emily hugged her favorite stuffed bunny, Mr. Buttons, and yawned. Before she drifted off, she whispered, "Thank you, Daddy. This is the best trip ever." Yes. Michael smiled in the dim glow of the lantern, kissed her forehead, and whispered goodnight. He crawled into his sleeping bag on the other side of the tent, listening to the soft sounds of the forest, the rustle of leaves, the chirp of crickets, and the distant call of an owl. As Michael lay awake for a moment, he gazed up at the tent ceiling, thinking about the next day's journey. He planned to cross the Rocky Mountains and visit a famous waterfall he had read about in a travel guide. He looked over at Emily, her breathing even and peaceful. He felt a deep contentment, knowing they were making memories that would last a lifetime. The road trip had just begun, and already it held a promise of discovery, bonding, simple joys that Michael hoped would shape Emily's view of the world. Soon, Michael closed his eyes, letting the night lull him to sleep. The moon climbed higher, and the forest settled into quiet. In the stillness, both father and daughter dreamed of the days ahead, the mountains they would climb, the diners they would find, and the stories they would share. That moment, the road stretched out before them like a ribbon of promise, and nothing could break the bond between Michael Harper and his little girl as they ventured toward new horizons. The sun rose early over the pine trees, painting the clearing in soft gold as Michael woke. He unzipped the tent flap and took a deep breath of fresh mountain air. The creek's water sparkled in the light, and a few birds greeted the morning. With gentle songs, Michael sat up and looked at Emily, still asleep, clutching Mr. Buttons. He smiled, careful not to wake her, and whispered that breakfast would be soon. He folded back the sleeping bag and stepped outside to gather water for coffee. Emily's eyes fluttered open at the sound of Michael humming as he poured water into the camp stove's pot. "Good morning, Daddy," she mumbled, rubbing her eyes. Michael handed her a cup of warm milk and a slice of leftover cherry pie, warmed by the pot's steam. "Morning, pumpkin," he said softly. "Ready for pancakes?" Emily nodded. And together they prepared simple pancakes with batter from a mixing pouch. Michael flipped them in the pan while Emily stirred blueberries into the last ones. The sweet berry aroma mixed with hot syrup. Emily giggled when a pancake landed on the plate upside down. By mid-morning they had packed the campsite. Michael rolled up the tent, and Emily tucked Mr. Buttons inside. They loaded the station. Wagon and Michael checked the oil and tire pressure. Emily handed him tools and watched as he wiped grease off his hands with a rag. She loved watching her dad fix things. It made her feel safe. Once the car was ready, they climbed in, buckled up, and Michael started the engine. The car rumbled, and they waved goodbye to the clearing. They drove on Highway 26 until it met Highway 287. The road curved through low hills, and wildflowers dotted the roadside. Emily spotted a herd of deer near a fence and pointed excitedly. Michael slowed down, and they watched as the deer grazed peacefully. "They look so calm," said Emily. Michael agreed, and then pointed toward the mountains rising ahead, their peaks still dusted with snow. Explained that those were the first ranges of the Rockies, far bigger than any hills they had seen. Emily leaned forward, eager to see them up close. After a few hours, they reached a small town called Modaly, Iowa. It had one main street lined with a hardware store, a post office, and a cafe with a faded red awning. They stopped at the cafe. For lunch, inside the wooden tables were worn smooth, and the walls held framed photographs of local events for fairs, school plays, and rodeos. Michael ordered turkey sandwiches and lemonade, while Emily chose macaroni and cheese. As they ate, an older man at the next table struck up a conversation. He introduced himself as Roy, a retired railroad worker who had lived in Modaly all his life. He asked where they were headed. Michael told him about their trip to see the waterfall in Colorado. Roy nodded approvingly. "You'll love the mountains," he said. "If you have time, stop by the old train depot outside of town. It's been empty since the line closed in 1978, but the building's still standing." Emily's eyes lit up at the idea of exploring an old depot. "Can we go, Daddy?" she asked. Michael smiled and said they could visit if their schedule allowed. Roy gave them directions to the depot and wished them a safe journey. Back on the road, Michael and Emily turned off onto a gravel side road that led toward the depot. The road shook the car, and dust rose in clouds behind them. They found the depot a long brick building with tall windows, most of them boarded up. The roof sagged in places and vines crept up the walls. Emily hopped out, her sneakers crunching. Gravel and Michael followed with his camera. They walked inside where sunlight slanted through cracks in the boards, illuminating old benches and rusted tracks that ended abruptly beneath the floorboards. Emily imagined passengers waiting for a train that never came. She ran her hand along a wooden bench, feeling its smoothness. Michael took photos, and Emily posed, pretending to hold a suitcase. They stayed only a few minutes before heading back to the car. As they drove away, Emily said the depot felt like a secret place, frozen in time. Michael nodded, happy to see her imagination at work. By late afternoon, they rejoined Highway 287 and continued west. The road climbed into foothills, and the air grew cooler. Michael rolled down the window so Emily could smell juniper and sage. He taught her about reading rock layers exposed along cuts in the hillside, how each layer was like a page in Earth's history. Emily pressed her forehead against the glass, tracing the lines with her finger. She loved learning from him. Soon they approached a fork in the road where a brown sign pointed toward a scenic overlook. Michael turned onto the narrow path, and they drove up a switchback road. The station wagon rattled over rocks, and Emily held onto her seat with wide eyes. When they reached the overlook, the view took their breath away. A deep valley stretched below, with winding rivers and towering cliffs. Michael parked and helped Emily out. They walked to the guardrail and peered down, tiny dots of vehicles. Far below, Emily gasped at how small the world looked from there. Michael pulled a small binocular from his bag and handed it to Emily. She looked through and saw. A river sparkled like a ribbon of silver. "It's so beautiful," she whispered. Michael agreed and told her how geologists often hiked these areas to study rock formations. Emily pointed out a red stripe of rock in the valley wall. Michael explained that the stripe was iron in the rock, which turned red when it touched oxygen. Emily nodded, storing every detail in her mind. As the sun dipped lower, Michael checked his watch. He said they needed to find a campsite before dark. Emily was reluctant to leave the overlook, but she trusted her dad's plan. They drove down the mountain into a dense forest. The trees arched over the road, creating a tunnel of green. Michael slowed and spotted a pull-out with room for their car. He turned in and parked near a small clearing. Emily jumped out and skipped toward a patch of moss, crouching to touch its softness. While Michael unloaded the tent and gear, Emily gathered sticks and pine cones for a fire. She hummed a tune and arranged the wood in a neat pile. Michael joined her and struck a match, bringing the fire to life. Flames crackled, and Emily's face glowed in the light. They roasted sausages and shared crackers with cheese. The night air smelled of pine needles and smoke. Emily stared upward, watching. Stars appear between trees. Before long, Emily's eyes drooped with sleep. Michael guided her to the tent and tucked her into her sleeping bag. She hugged Mr. Buttons tight and whispered, "Thank you, Daddy, for everything today." Michael kissed her forehead and said, "Tomorrow, we find that waterfall." Melly murmured a tired okay and drifted off. Michael sat by the fire for a moment, sipping coffee from his thermos and reviewing the map by lantern light. He traced the road ahead toward Colorado, noting a rest stop near a long tunnel where they might refill gas. He thought about the next day's drive and hoped no problems would come their way. He smiled at the thought of Emily's excitement. When she saw the waterfall, the fire died down to embers, and Michael stood to shake out the tent. He crawled inside, careful not to jostle Emily. He zipped the flap and lay down, the lantern's glow fading behind his eyes. Outside, crickets began their night chorus, and the forest settled into quiet.
Michael's last dog,
ChatGPT said. The morning air felt crisp as Emily woke inside the little tent. She rubbed her eyes and peeked out at the pale light slipping through the pine needles overhead. Filled the kettle with water from his canteen. Emily climbed out and rubbed her sleepy face. "Good morning," she said in a small voice. Michael smiled and handed her a warm cup of milk. "Morning, kiddo," he replied. "Ready to chase that waterfall today?" Emily nodded, excitement shining in her face, and they ate cold cereal and fruit under the tall trees. They packed up fast, their minds focused on the waterfall Michael had read about, a place where water crashed over rocks in a long, white sheet that shone like silver in the sun. He wanted Emily to see it with her own eyes. With camping gear stowed and car check toil topped up, tires firm, they set off down the gravel road. The station wagon bounced and rattled before joining the paved highway again. Emily pressed her face to the window, watching as the trees thinned and peaked mountains drew near. The highway wound through foothills that rose steeply on one side and fell away into valleys on the other. Michael pointed out rocky cliffs shaped by wind and rain over millions of years. Emily pressed her ear to the glass and listened for echoes of ancient storms. She pictured the land long ago, before roads or towns, when only deer and bears roamed these hills. Michael glanced at her and smiled at her wonder. He slowed the car at a small pullout where a brown sign read historic tunnel ahead. Turned onto a narrow lane, following the sign's arrow. The road plunged into shade as tall pines leaned overhead. Soon they saw the tunnel's mouth, an arch of rough stone, dark inside except for a pinprick of light at the other end. Michael parked and got out, stretching his legs. Emily hopped out too, her boots crunching on gravel. They walked to the tunnel entrance, their footsteps echoing. Michael shone a flashlight, and Emily held her breath as the beam lit old railroad, ties still embedded in the ground. She felt a thrill, imagining freight trains that once thundered through here. After a few minutes, they climbed back into the car. The engine roared, and they followed the road that curved around the mountain. When they emerged into sunlight again, the world looked different. Wide plains stretched below, and the real Rockies rose jagged and grand before them. Emily gasped, gripping the dash. Michael laughed and guided the wagon toward a small town marked on their map, Glenwood Springs, Colorado. He hoped to fill up the tank and grab lunch before heading into more remote stretches. Glenwood Springs was bustling when they arrived. Tourists milled around shops and steam rose from hot springs near the river's edge. Michael drove to a service station where a red pump stood under a tall metal canopy. He shut off the engine and stepped out, wiping his hands on a rag. To Emily, bounced next to him, stretching after the long drive. A young attendant named Carla greeted them with a friendly wave. Michael filled the tank and chatted about the weather. Emily asked if she had visited the waterfall. Carla smiled and said it was worth the trip. With the car filled and bellies rumbling, Michael and Emily walked to a small cafe across the street. The sign read, Mountain View Diner, in chipped blue letters. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and bacon. They sat at a booth by the window and ordered grilled cheese sandwiches and fries. Emily's mouth watered at the melted cheese stretching with every bite. She licked her fingers and declared it the best lunch ever. Michael grinned and tousled her hair, happy to see her so full of joy. Back in the station wagon, Michael checked his watch. Time to find that waterfall, he said. He followed the road out of town and onto a narrower highway that led uphill. Pine trees crowded the roadside, and patches of snow lingered in shady spots. The road climbed steadily, and Emily felt a little dizzy, pressing her head against the seat. Michael slowed and offered her a bottle of water. She sipped gratefully and looked out at the rising cliffs. They reached a fork in the road where a wooden sign pointed left, Falls Trailhead, 6 miles. Michael turned the wheel, and the car bumped along a gravel path. Soon, they saw a parking area with a few cars and hikers. Michael parked and fetched their depaka, small backpack with sandwiches, water, and a first aid kit. Lee strapped it on, and they set off on foot along a dirt trail. The path wound through clearings where wildflowers dotted the grass, purple lupin, yellow daisies, and tiny bluebells. Emily bent low to smell them, and Michael snapped photos. The trail climbed gently, and Emily's pace slowed as she climbed. Over roots and rocks, Michael held out his hand, steadying her when the ground tilted. She squeezed his hand and smiled, proud to keep up. Birds darted between branches, and a squirrel scampered across the path, pausing to look at them with bright eyes before dashing away. Emily giggled, calling it the forest pet. After about an hour, the trail opened at a viewing platform, overlooking the valley below. Michael pointed to where a ribbon of water snaked through the rock. "That's the river that feeds the falls," he said. Emily peered down, trying to spot the waterfall's mist. She pressed her hand to the wooden rail and leaned forward, eyes wide. Tiny drops of water drifted upward like a soft cloud. "I see it," she whispered. "Why?" Michael grinned, and led the way down a steeper path. At the base, they found a wooden bridge crossing the river. Water gushed beneath, in a roar that made Emily's heart pound with excitement. Michael held her hand as they walked across. The mist cooled their faces, and Emily let it sprinkle her hair. On the other side, wooden steps led down to the pool. Where the water landed, Michael helped her climb the damp steps carefully. At the bottom, splashes kicked up a cool breeze. Emily stretched her arms wide, welcoming the spray. She laughed as a stray drop slid down her cheek. Michael knelt beside her and pointed to a silverfish darting between rocks. "See how fast it moves?" he said. Emily crouched to watch it wriggle along the wet stones. "It's like magic," she said softly. Michael nodded and told her how fish and frogs thrived in these clear, cold streams. He said sometimes bears came down from the hills to fish for trout. Emily's eyes grew big at the thought of bears so close, and she pressed herself closer to Michael. They sat on a dry rock and unwrapped their sandwiches. Emily took small bites, still breathing in the waterfall's mist. Michael sipped water and watched her, thinking how lucky he was to share this moment with her. After eating, Emily explored the edge of the pool, skipping stones and counting ripples. Michael took photos, capturing her bright smile and the white cascade behind her. As afternoon stretched on, Michael checked the sky. Clouds were drifting in, gray at the edges. "We should head back soon," he said. Emily sighed, reluctant to leave this place, but she trusted her dad's judgment, and crossed the bridge again. Emily looked back at the waterfall once more before turning to follow the trail upward. Back at the station wagon, Emily shook out her hair and climbed in. Michael started the engine. He glanced at the rearview mirror and saw Emily's head rest against the seat, eyes closed, a content smile on her face. He patted the steering wheel and pulled onto the road, retracing the winding route toward Glenwood Springs. They passed the cafe, the gas station, and Highway 287. Heading south now toward Interstate 70, the road was busy with trucks and cars racing toward Denver or beyond. Michael felt a tug of worry. He disliked crowded highways, but he focused on the adventure they'd had. Emily was finally asleep in the back, breathing steady and slow. They drove through tunnels once more, each one echoing with their engine's hum. At one long tunnel, Michael clicked on the dome light to find his sunglasses. As the car entered the dark passage, the light flickered and went out. Michael let out a small sigh, reached for the switch. It stayed dark. He tapped the roof. "Looks like a fuse blew," he muttered. Emily stirred, blinking at the sudden darkness. "Daddy?" she asked softly. Michael turned off the engine's lights and opened his door to find a flashlight. But as soon as he stepped out, a deep rumble echoed through the tunnel like something moving toward them. The flashlight fell from his hand, and in the stuttering beam he saw shapes shifting in the shadows. His heart pounded. He called Emily's name, but the echo swallowed his words. The rumble grew louder, and Michael grabbed the flashlight. He shone it down the tunnel, but the beam cut short in darkness. His mind raced. Was it another car? A rock slide? Reached for the door handle to wake Emily, but the shapes in the darkness closed in faster than his breath could catch. In a moment that stretched like a long, silent echo, Michael's eyes locked on the flashlight beam dancing on rough stone. He lunged forward, but a sudden quake in the ground pitched him off balance. Emily's soft cry reached him, a sound that would linger in his memory forever, caught between sleep and fear. Then the darkness swallowed them both, and the world fell silent once more. Michael's heart pounded as the flashlight flickered in his hand and Emily's soft cry echoed behind him. He called her name, voice trembling, but the tunnel swallowed his words. He scrambled forward, hands outstretched, trying to feel her small frame in the darkness. A sudden tremor rattled the ground beneath his feet, as if something heavy had shifted deep in the rock. Fear coiled in his chest, but he refused to give in. He stumbled into the darkness, willing the beam of light to cut through the black. He found nothing but empty air and cold stone walls. Emily was gone. Michael dropped to his knees and scanned the ground with the flashlight. His stomach tightened when he saw her little backpack lying open, straps tangled in gravel. He snatched it up and checked inside. Sandwiches were gone. But the journal he had slipped in that morning lay close to the zipper. He ran his fingers over its leather cover, desperate for some sign. Michael shouted for help, voice echoing until it faded. He stumbled back to the car, flashlight guiding his path. He fumbled at the door, pausing to catch his breath before turning on the engine. The lights came on, dim against the tunnel's gloom, but they were enough to guide him to the exit. Pressed the horn, a long blast that he hoped would reach someone outside. Then the car rolled forward, wheels skidding on gravel until they burst into the open air. Dazed, Michael drove to the nearest ranger station, just a few miles back down the mountain. He ran inside, boots thudding on wooden floors, and told the ranger what had happened. The ranger's face went pale. He called in deputies, and soon the highway patrol and park rangers were racing up the road behind Michael's station wagon. Flashlights bobbed through the trees, search dogs strained at their leashes, and helicopters circled overhead, their spotlights cutting arcs through the night sky. For 2 long nights, search teams combed the forest and the tunnel. They called out Emily's name. They shone beams into caves and hollows. Bloodhounds followed scents until they faded. Friends and family drove from Omaha, worry etched on every face. Michael sat in the ranger station for hours, clutching the postcard Emily had sent Grandma Louise. He stared at her neat handwriting and prayed he would find her smiling face again. But after a week, the search wound down. No sign of Emily. Her backpack and her father's notes remained the only clues. News teams came and went, cameras flashing in front of the station. Reporters asked Michael for details, voice rising to fill empty spaces when he had no answers. He answered the same questions over and over. When did you last see her? What did you hear? What do you think happened? Each question cut him deeper, reminding him how little he knew. In the weeks that followed, detectives interviewed hiker groups and maintenance crews, rechecked the tunnel's structure for hidden chambers, and scoured the creek for objects carried. Downstream, they found neither Emily nor Michael. Detectives called it a likely abduction by someone who knew the backroads. Rumors rippled through local towns, a drifter seen near the tunnel days before, a fisherman who offered Michael help, a trucker who told a story of strange lights in the tunnel at night. None of these led to proof. Years passed and the case grew cold. Michael returned to Omaha and went back to work at Thompson's auto shop, wounds buried under a calm voice. He never stopped searching, put up flyers at every rest stop, every cafe, every campgrounds he could reach. He hung Emily's photo on a bulletin board in his living room, covered with notes of sightings and phone numbers. He drove alone to the mountain tunnel each summer, calling her name into the dark, hoping maybe she would hear him. Grandma Louise kept her granddaughter's postcard in a glass frame beside her bed. She knitted scarves and hats in Emily's favorite colors, hoping one day her family would need them. Friends prayed, sent good thoughts. Volunteers formed a group called Light for Emily, organizing annual memorial walks along the highway where her car was found. Each year, dozens lit candles at sunset, their flames flickering like tiny hopes in the twilight.
Michael joined today.
Once, holding a candle until the wind snuffed it, then watched until every last flame winked out. Decades slipped by. Technology advanced, DNA testing grew precise, yet no new evidence appeared. Detectives filed the case under unsolved mysteries. Emily's name entered a national registry of missing children. Michael grew older, hair silvering at the temples. He still drove the station wagon on free weekends, now restored and painted a deep blue. He kept the journal Emily had written that morning, tucked safely in his glove box, pages blank where she never got to write more. Then, in early spring of 2024, a retired highway patrol officer named Lisa Carter sat in a dusty office at the Colorado State Police headquarters. She had joined the force the year Michael's case opened and had worked on dozens of missing person investigations. Now in retirement, she volunteered to review cold cases. She spread old files across her desk: photos, notes, taped interviews. One item caught her eye: a photograph of a footprint taken near the tunnel entrance. The print was half washed by rain, but the arch and heel were clear. She remembered no one had re-examined that print in years. Lisa reached for her laptop and uploaded the image to a modern forensic database. She adjusted the contrast until the lines stood out. Then she held her breath as the software searched millions of prints. After minutes that felt like hours, a match flashed on her screen. A partial match. The print matched a drifter who had died in 1998 of a heart attack in Kansas. His name was Thomas "Tom" Anders, known for traveling highways and camping near roadside tunnels. No one had connected him to the case before. Her pulse quickened. She grabbed the files on Anders' old arrest records, a photo of his face. She studied the man who had vanished a quarter-century ago, leaving only a rusted pickup truck and a few scraps of newspaper. No one knew where he went after 1986. Lisa made a call to the cold case detective team. Within days, they obtained a warrant to search Anders' abandoned storage locker in a small town south of Denver. The locker was cramped with old furniture, boxes, and a yellowed sleeping bag. Investigators sifted through dusty items until a small cardboard box drew their attention. Inside lay a child's watch, Emily's watch, blue with tiny flowers painted around the dial, chained to her backpack, and a half-burned page from Emily's journal, the one she had packed that morning, with a single line: "This waterfall will be magic." Detectives sealed the locker and bagged the watch and journal page as evidence. They also found a worn leather notebook with Anders' neat writing. The first entries were mundane: camp locations, weather notes. But the last pages held a scrawled confession. "I took the little girl. I thought I would only scare her. The tunnel was my chance. I panicked." The pages ended in blotches of faded ink. Lisa Carter stood in the evidence room, holding the watch like a fragile treasure. She thought of Michael Harper, who had held Emily's memory for nearly 40 years. She knew this clue would bring new hope to a man who had lived in darkness since that night. She sealed the evidence and called the lead detective. "We may finally know who did this." As word of the discovery spread, the case was reopened. Search teams gathered, using Anders' notes to pinpoint locations mentioned in his notebook. Michael, now in his 60s, stared at the photo of the watch on his phone. Tears filled his eyes as he saw the tiny flowers he chose for Emily. He whispered her name, voice thick with emotion. For the first time in decades, he felt hope stirring. In his heart, the journey to answers had begun again, guided by a clue from long ago. Michael stared at the photo of the tiny blue watch, the one Emily had worn that morning. His hands trembled as he set his coffee cup down and ran outside to the old station wagon waiting in his driveway. He felt a mix of fear and hope: fear of what he might find, and hope that Emily's story could finally be told. He climbed into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine roared to life, as if waking from a long sleep. He gripped the steering wheel, remembering how he had once shown Emily how to hold it straight on wide roads. He steered toward Colorado, toward the place where answers waited. The road to the canyon was long and winding. Michael drove through familiar towns: Glenwood Springs, Modalian, then on two dirt roads he had not seen for years. He passed the old depot and the little diner, where a faded sign still read Rosie's Roadside Cafe. He remembered Emily mailing her postcard there. He blinked back tears. He told himself to keep going, that Emily's memory was guiding him now. By evening, he reached a small camp near the foothills, where state police and search teams had set up tents and vehicles. Flashing lights dotted the clearing like fireflies. He stepped out of the wagon, feeling the cool mountain air brush his face. Detectives and rangers greeted him with quiet respect. Leading them was Detective Lisa Carter, the retired officer whose hunch had changed everything. She shook Michael's hand and held his gaze. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. "We've followed Tom Anders' notes to this spot." They climbed into a jeep and drove deeper into the canyon. The path narrowed, and the walls of rock rose high on either side. Michael felt his heart pound with each turn. He recalled hiking here with Emily, her giggles echoing off the cliffs as they chased butterflies. Now he and Lisa talked in low voices, stepping carefully over loose stones. Their footsteps echoed like whispers in a long tunnel. At last they reached a flat ledge above a deep pool of water. The same waterfall Emily had seen poured down in a silver ribbon. Sunlight caught the spray, turning it to fine mist that shimmered. Michael's throat tightened, remembered Emily's laughter as the mist tickled her face. He could almost hear her small voice say, "Daddy, it's magic." Rangers marked a spot behind a cluster of boulders. Here the ground was softer, as if carried by water long ago. Using shovels and brushes, they dug carefully. Michael knelt beside them, unable to stand. Detective Carter called out softly, "Here." Michael's breath caught. They uncovered a small metal box, its paint chipped, but the latch intact. Inside lay a tangle of tiny bones, wrapped in a scrap of cloth. Michael closed his eyes, steadied his breathing, and took a step back. He felt the world tilt. Detective Carter knelt beside the box and spoke quietly into her radio.
Ah!
Soon, a medical examiner arrived and took the remains with gentle hands. Michael watched as they worked, his heart pounding. He thought of Emily's bright eyes and curly hair. He remembered her favorite games, the stories she loved, the way she held Mr. Buttons tight. He pictured her smile and felt a pain that cut deeper than any cold wind. Yet beneath the pain, a small seed of peace sprouted, knowing he would finally have answers. Night fell, and they gathered around a lantern. The medical examiner explained that DNA tests confirmed the remains were indeed Emily's. Michael pressed his hands together, whispering her name. Tears rolled down his cheeks, but he did not look away. He felt both sorrow and relief. Sorrow for the girl he lost, relief that her story would no longer be a question. The examiner said there was no sign of foul play beyond what Anders's notebook had confessed. Michael nodded, accepting the truth he had feared. In the days that followed, the small town of Glenwood Springs remembered them. Neighbors brought hot meals to the search camp. Local bakeries sent fresh bread every morning. Volunteers from Light for Emily arrived with candles and flowers. They lit the candles at the river's edge, watching flames dance on the water. Michael walked among them, offering quiet thanks. He carried Emily's photo close to his heart, her smiling face shining in the candlelight. When the official report was complete, Detective Carter handed Michael a folder. Inside were photographs of evidence, Anders's notebook, and the watch she had found in the storage locker. Michael traced the flowers painted on its face with a trembling finger. He remembered Emily's small voice saying she chose them because they were bright like her favorite dress. His chest ached with love and longing. That evening, Michael and Detective Carter climbed to the overlook, where they had first spotted the valley. He held the watch up to the sky. Stars overhead seemed to shine just for Emily. He whispered into the wind, "Good night, my girl." The breeze felt gentle, as if carrying her laughter back to him. He let the watch dangle from his hand and watched the stars until his eyes grew heavy. Back in Omaha, relatives prepared a small service in Emily's honor. Grandma Louise kneaded dough for dinner rolls Emily used to love. Friends gathered in Michael's living room, placing candles around the framed portrait of Emily on the wall. Each spoke of a memory, her bright questions, her playful spirit, her love for adventure. Michael listened through tears, feeling warmth spread through his chest. Realized that Emily's life had touched many hearts, and her story would live on through the people she inspired. After the service, Michael returned to the Rocky Mountains one last time. He carried the watch she wore and the journal he had kept close in his glove box. He hiked to the waterfall's edge at dawn. The morning mist rose like a soft curtain, and the sun painted the sky in pale pinks and golds. Michael knelt by the pool and opened the journal, placed the watch on a flat stone, and wrote a final entry in Emily's voice. "I see the waterfall, and it is magic." He smiled through tears and closed the journal. Then he placed both the watch and journal inside a small leather pouch. Michael stood, feeling the spray cool his face. He tossed the pouch into the pool near the waterfall's feet. It floated a moment before disappearing under the silver ribbon. He whispered, "Fly free, my little one." He watched until the pouch was gone from sight. On the drive home, Michael felt a lightness he had not known in decades. The road seemed friendlier now, its curves and hills welcoming rather than ominous. He thought of future trips he might take, to remember the good days with Emily rather than dwell on her loss. Planned to visit other waterfalls, other places she had dreamed of seeing. He would carry her memory with him on every journey. Back in Omaha, Michael reopened Thompson's auto shop. The bell above the door jingled as customers came and went. He worked on cars and told the occasional customer a short story about his daughter and the waterfall in Colorado. Let them laugh at her adventures and feel the joy she had brought him. He found comfort in sharing her spirit, keeping her alive in everyday moments. Each year on the anniversary of Emily's disappearance, Michael returned to the overlook. He brought wildflowers instead of candles and left them in a neat pile at the railing. He watched the valley bathed in sunrise and thought of Emily's wide eyes as she first saw the mountains. He said her name aloud and felt her presence in the hush of dawn. He never felt completely alone again. In the end, the clue found in 2024 did more than solve a mystery. It gave Michael Harper back the memory of his daughter as a living, breathing girl full of wonder. It helped him find peace in his heart. It reminded everyone who heard their story that hope can live in the darkest places. It's waiting for someone brave enough to follow its whisper. Emily's laughter still echoed in the canyon, soft and bright, a promise that some magic never fades.